Hi, my name is Angel. I'm one of the Epic Youth Council members. Happy Care Day. Today we're going to be talking about the accommodation panel discussion. So I'm going to open it up saying that although there are a lot of challenges, there are supports out there in the aftercare system with accommodation, but mainly we're going to discuss the kind of challenges and obstacles for care leavers in accommodation. So Daniel, Damien, sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm going to ask you first about maybe some of the positives to do with aftercare accommodation for care leavers.
Okay, thank you, Angel. I suppose from our perspective on the Oberstown campus, lots of the young people are fortunate in that there's still a family involvement with them, so they still have a home to go to. In some circumstances where young people have come from the care system into the criminal justice system, it presents a different challenge then, because typically now young people leaving our campus could be 18 years plus, so they are now in competition with adults who may be homeless or in need of accommodation. So that presents a significant challenge. Where we try and meet that challenge, I suppose, is throughout our placement planning process with regard to mapping this out from a very early stage, that this is a requirement for this young person when they leave the campus. So I suppose we've made good moves, I suppose, in relation to that with external stakeholders and external partners. But every now and then there's still a fly in the ointment with a young person who may have accommodation difficulties, and that presents a real challenge, not for the campus or the organisation, but for the young person themselves, in terms of how am I going to move forward successfully in my life to maximise my potential. So it's in the main, lots of our young people do have accommodation, but in recent years, because the age bracket has changed, those who are leaving now who don't have accommodation are in competition with adults, and that presents a significant challenge from time to time. So that's how it is in our neck of the woods. Thank you.
Dylan, as a care leaver yourself, what has your experience been with accommodation?
So I guess with my own accommodation piece was that, you know, it's same for a lot of people that would have came out of res care. It would have been, you go from your res care home straight into an aftercare accommodation. But that's kind of one of my big issues, is that usually with those aftercare accommodations, it's from 1 year to 3 years. And one of the points that I've always kind of made is that for a lot of people, that's only like putting on hold homelessness, or putting on hold housing insecurity. You know, we're in a housing crisis at the moment, and I think care leavers are affected. Even they're already impacted by finding houses, but you know, when we're all collectively in that crisis, it's like it's almost more impact on the care leavers, you know. But yeah, like I've always like I do have an issue with kind of like those time limited aftercare accommodations, where when it comes to the end, you're almost like relying on friends. Hopefully has a room or a couch, you know. But yeah.
Definitely. Have you had any experience in the private rental market, or trying to get accommodation as a young adult in the city?
Yeah, well, I think for like most young people, you know, it is the only choices to kind of rent, especially in Dublin. And if anyone else wants to jump in, that's great. But it's like there's already that kind of discrimination already against young people. So when, say, if you are leaving care at 18 and you don't go into an aftercare accommodation, say there's too many, there's a long waiting list or something like that, like, and you have to go into that private rental, and you don't have any previous, like, you know, references, or you don't have any, you know, if you're still in school or something, you know, like that, like, you know, and then you kind of see landlords would be like, you know, well, we only take people that are in, you know, they're in college, or they're in their careers, you know, and I think that's a direct impact on, you know, that isn't, if that they're not, that it's that transition at 18 is the issue, you know, because they don't have the resources to kind of
Definitely
go through that, like.
I think mainly, if you look at young people in general, most of us don't actually leave home until we're in our late 20s or 30s. And as a care leaver, you turn 18 and all of a sudden you're thrown out into the world.
Yeah.
Niall, have you had any experience in relation to accommodation?
Yeah, I mean, I think the average age of young people leaving their family home is about 25 now. So that gives you a huge set of experiences. It gives you a chance to build references. It gives you a chance to build financial security and probably job security as well. So as you say, if you're moving at 18 years of age, you are literally a fish out of water. You have no idea how to swim in this river, how to make it work. And even with supports, that's difficult. And even just simply on the basis of loneliness, or, who do I know around here? Where can I go for certain things to support me? So, I mean, one of the things that we've been looking at is the possibility that in most of the British Isles, the support is up to, youth is considered up to 25 years of age. Psychologically and neurologically now we know that adolescence extends into the early 20s. Your brain isn't fully developed. So we're asking an awful lot of our 18-year-olds coming out of care. And if you're an 18-year-old coming out of a very secure family home, it still would be difficult. But coming out of care and perhaps, without the support and the usual family grouping to help you along, it's a really big ask. So I think it's incumbent on the state to make sure that we make that transition as smooth as possible. We provide the appropriate accommodation. We provide it at a cost that's reasonable and doable for young people. And we also act as the referee into the future, so that when you do get to that stage of 21 and you have to move out, then your reference coming from whoever the care worker or whoever it might be is valid and useful, so that the landlords don't have that excuse to use against you. So I think there's a lot of things we can do, and we really need to do. We're behind time in doing that stuff, because a lot of the other countries in Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales are doing it much better at this stage.
Yeah. I know from my own personal experience as a care leaver trying to get accommodation, especially when you're a student as well, you're going out into the world trying to pay bills, trying to pay for travel to your college, and you're also trying to grow as a person and develop your skills to actually be able to live independently. Especially as a care leaver, you leave not knowing how to do your own washing or cooking, not knowing how to pay rent. And I think with the struggles of high rents and limited accommodation, now I know aftercare accommodation is available, but the long waiting lists again are an obstacle to care leavers. And I think even the kind of fear of becoming homeless and the rise of homelessness amongst care leavers is having a major impact. What do you think we can improve? How do you think we can actually tackle this issue?
I suppose from my point of view, the state needs to facilitate and plan ahead. Again, it's one of these things that we know, we've been hearing this for a number of years, and we can plan ahead. And as Damien says, some young people will often end up in the justice system, and they don't need to be there if we'd planned ahead and supported our children, young people. Because the investment we put in now will prevent an awful lot of difficulty in the future, whether it's mental health, homelessness, addictions, justice issues. So I think it's about grasping the here and now and saying, right, what have we learned and what do we need to put in place to make this smoother and easier for the future? So those young people become better apprentices, better in college, the careers, and they become self-sufficient, and then we contribute back into the society, as opposed to trying to survive on the bare minimum and then ending up becoming a long-term burden on society. And that's where we need to get to, put those processes in place and those supports in place, so that you have accommodation, you have funding, you have support there. You know that you're working towards independence, but you also know that you can do that gradually over the course of a number of years. And when you become independent, you will be fully self-sufficient. That's the target. And that's what we owe to you, because if you come into care, it's because we are becoming your parent as a state. We need to do that, as good parents do. And as I say, most parents are letting their children live with them until they're 25. And when they're 25, the child is ready to move out and be totally self-sufficient, with all those skills that you talk about, the cooking, the cleaning, the drying, the renting, the budgeting, the travel. All those sorts of things are then in place for that child to move out. And if we're going to be locus parentis, as a state, we need to be the best parent we can be, and that's how you do it.
I like that you said investing in our futures and in us now, rather than putting it off and it becoming a bigger problem later on. Damien, what
Just-
about yourself?
The concept of the emerging adult is something that the state and the nation really needs to grasp. Lots of us are fortunate enough to have been allowed to live with our parents into our 20s or whatever, and have had that stable environment that allows us manage those different set of life skills that are required for independent living. The concept of community and network as well is really important from a care leaver's perspective, in that the roots that perhaps they've grown in a certain community are suddenly uplifted and are transferred or transformed into a different community or network, and that creates another layer of challenge for any person leaving care. So I think, to Niall's point, and it's similar in the justice world and the care world, the earlier the intervention, the earlier the funding and the needs-based assessment kicks in, the long-term problems should not occur. I think the capacity to figure out what's our end point. So somebody's going to leave care, somebody's going to leave the justice system at some point. So at that point in time, what needs to be in place? And the earlier we start to address that, the greater the chance we have of closing the gaps that develop when young people leave care. So I think we do have to get behind the emerging adult concept, and we do have to give that some value and some weight from a care perspective and also from a justice perspective. That's.
Can I just add also, just from the LGBT perspective, one thing that we had to make clear in our leaflets when we were making them, for whoever reads them, that like there are resources, because we were talking about that for accommodations, you know, if you are LGBT and leaving care, you might not feel safe going to go into that private rental market, or, you know, and we kind of we really tried to drive home that there were resources there for accommodation if you are LGBT. And I think just making more people aware that there are people to help with housing, you know, there are people to help with this, like, just, you know, but I also just wanted to add there at the end, like, that one thing that I've kind of found, and that just, I know there's a big thought process around it, that we need, because there are care leavers that leave care and they totally settle in so well where they go, and I think we need to kind of start looking at that and examining that, like, through a longitudinal study of what happens to care leavers after they leave care. What was there something that happened in that, like, process of leaving care that like that they settled in great, or didn't settle in great, you know? I think that needs to kind of be addressed by the state, you know, hopefully.
Can I ask you as well, what do you think, you know, we can actually put in place to improve the situation around accommodation? Do you think that maybe extending the aftercare to the age of 26 rather than 23 would be supportive?
Yeah, well, I think aftercare to 26 helps with so much. You know, it's not just, I think it would depend on, with the aftercare's role as well in that accommodation piece. You know, and I guess making sure that, like, you know, that they also know that resources are there, because you can extend it to 26, but if it's there's no help with, like, if they don't know what there is out there, you know. And that's the important part as well, that it's that consistency, you know.
Definitely, yeah.
I just wonder, in terms of the recovery phase of the global pandemic, and we discussed it earlier there, the end might be in sight with the vaccine and stuff like that. But the shape of work has changed for lots of countries and for the nation of Ireland, I suppose. Office space, retail space is going to become vacant over the next number of years. There needs to be some imagination, some drive around how we can reimagine these spaces, because otherwise we're going to be left with buildings, lovely buildings, which will come into disrepair, which will then become a scar on the city's faces and the suburbs or whatever. So there's a real conversation to be had around what's possible within the recovery phase around repurposing or reimagining these buildings that the companies are not going to occupy anymore, because they don't need to, because people are going to be working from home. So that's, if that could be on some agenda, specifically in relation to accommodation and care leavers and people who require this, it would address, perhaps it would address some of the accommodation needs for the state. It's worth having a conversation about, I think.
Yeah.
Definitely, yeah. Does anybody else want to put into that?
Just on that, I mean, I saw an interesting piece where somebody's talking about, I think in Germany and a number of other countries, they're now repurposing car parks because people are no longer travelling like that. They're remote working.
Yeah.
The car parks are now becoming much more social hubs for social innovation. So I can see the purpose of then the buildings as well can create especially opportunities for people with care workers or care leavers to be in a city centre, so everything's close. You don't need the transport, you don't need the car, you don't need to maybe spend a fortune on buses or travel.
And you see, there's real value in it there's real value in it from a societal, a governmental perspective. But if I'm a major company, there's real value in it for me from a corporate social responsibility perspective as well, in terms of me giving back to the community, giving back to the population. So I think if we tap into that market, that there's something really possible in terms of repurposing and reimagining what these buildings can be used for into the future.
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea, the repurposing of buildings, because right now we're in such a housing crisis with homelessness on the rise, and there's just not enough homes actually out there. And care leavers in particular are not even being able to access the rental market because the high
Cost prohibitive.
costs, And I think if there was actually buildings and homes specifically allocated to care leavers at lower rates of rent, it would be such a difference.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that valuable discussion, and I think there's a lot to be taken out of that. I hope you all have an amazing care day, and we're going to wrap that up there.